We achieved more in 6 months than almost any administration could accomplish in 8 years, and we're going to have a lot of good 6 months left. We're going to have a 6 and another 6 and another 6, so we'll keep going.
In 6 months, President Trump has succeeded in getting institutions to bend to his will, whether it's Congress, the courts, law firms, universities, and media companies, often with threats that force obedience among even some of his sharpest critics. But what does the American public think about the president's unprecedented use of his executive power? Well, brand new CNN polling out for the first time right now offers a new warning sign for Trump on his bedrock issue, immigration. Just 42% of Americans now approve how he's handling immigration, with only 40% approving of his policies on deportations specifically. And when it comes to deportations, 55% think Trump has gone too far. And that's up sharply by 10 points since February. My panel is back. So just to dig a little deeper into these immigration numbers that are now just coming out, the view, if you break down by issue on immigration, is how the American public feels. How do they feel about increasing the ICE budget by billions of dollars? Just 31% support that idea. Really, that's the number. That's the high point. We look at ending birthright citizenship, building new detention centers, detaining undocumented immigrants with no criminal record. Under 30% in all those categories. Then what about his immigration policies at large? Are they making the United States safer? 53% of the country says no, they're not. And then the last point here is the federal government carefully following the law on deportations. The answer overwhelmingly is no. 58% say no, and that is about a little bit higher than it was in April. Priscilla, you cover immigration. What's your reaction to this?
So a couple things. When the president came into office, there was deep frustration among Republicans and Democrats over the way that immigration had been handled under the Biden administration. So there was a desire for the president, frankly, to move quickly on immigration, and his team had been preparing for that for the last 4 years. But the question was always, how does he do it, and how does that resonate with the American public? So I actually think the most telling of all of those numbers is the one that's broken down between February, April, and now, because there are key things that happen in the intervening months. So in March, for example, he had invoked that sweeping wartime authority that led to Venezuelan migrants being sent to the prison in El Salvador, including Abreu Garcia, Salvadoran national. He was part of that mix. There was intense public backlash when he did that, including from some of his own supporters, like Joe Rogan on his podcast, because there were anecdotes of who exactly made up that group of people, which in the end was not all with criminal records. Then after that, in April, you see the third country deportation. So in May, there was that whole litigation about sending people to South Sudan and to other far-flung countries. So all of this to say that when you're looking at those numbers of how the disapproval start to increase, that you should look at the moments that happened in between those months where people started to ask questions as to what exactly is going on here, and are these actually criminals that they are deporting? And what our reporting has come to show is that a small fraction are those with criminal convictions. The majority are often those with no convictions or with pending charges, and sometimes those are traffic violations or immigration violations. And so the big question going into the next 6 months, as the president put it himself, is who exactly are they targeting, and then how exactly are they doing it? And with now a lot of money on the table,
hundreds of billions of
it's going to happen much more quickly. This is going to supercharge their operations. I've talked to the White House border czar, Tom Homan, about this, and that can get messy if they don't do it right. And what these numbers show us is that the public is paying attention.
And perhaps it could slip even further. Go ahead.
But you know, it's interesting. Yes, these numbers are moving in the wrong direction for the president. It's clear that the average American thinks that his immigration policies are going too far. He's underwater now. The main points of controversy are around these tough enforcement actions around otherwise law-abiding residents and so on and so forth. But, and I don't know if you have the crosstabs handy, these top-line numbers are different than the splits among Democrats independents and Republicans, and you still have a majority of Republicans who really support his immigration actions. Even among those Republicans, there are a lot of Republicans who have, and we hear this again and again in focus groups, a lot of people who voted for President Trump and are Republican are like, I don't know about deporting, like
farm workers,
the landscaper down the street. But having said that, at the top of the segment, you were talking about how he's wielded so much power. And this goes to the issue of gerrymandering, of the way House districts are built, and of the power of the base. If President Trump were running for re-election for a third term, this would be really problematic, these numbers. But if he is trying to control Congress and block Congress from blocking him, as long as the majority of Republican voters are standing by his immigration policies, even if the rest of the country is up in arms about it, he has leverage over his party in Congress, and they're in the majority right now.
And then in the 6-month mark, it's not just immigration where he's underwater. Remember, he campaigned, of course, on immigration. That was one of the strongest issues. The economy was as well. And then you look at how he's doing on the economy, at least how the American public sees how he's doing. Not good. This is 40% of Americans in this CNN poll say that they approve of his handling of the economy. And he's under 50% on pretty much every issue. And even his big bill that passed Congress, just 39% of Americans support his massive domestic policy bill. Do you think Trump is obviously very confident of what he's done so far? He's gotten these institutions to do what he wants. He's accomplished a lot in the first 6 months. There's no doubt about it. But there's a feeling clearly among the American public that he's overreaching.
Right. I'm going to be really closely watching that number with the economy and tariffs. We know that a lot of trade negotiations are still on the table right now, whether with the EU or with other countries around the world. And the president has said, look, we could reach a deal or we could not reach a deal, and I'll just impose big tariffs on these countries. But we know tariffs can be very, destabilizing. We know it's effectively an import tax on U.S. consumers. We know a lot of Republicans don't generally like tariffs. So if these negotiations don't really pan out, if he does go through and impose, punishing tariffs on countries that he doesn't reach a deal with, how that economy number moves will be really interesting to watch.
Yeah, and then you look at his numbers historically compared to other presidents at this time in their presidency. President Trump now 42%. That is below every other president other than Donald Trump in 2017. So
yeah, he's really popular compared to 2017. I listen. We did a story the other day. Punchbowl News did a story. They're going to try and bring up immigration bills to vote on in Congress. The House Republicans are. It's not going to pass Congress, but goes back to Margaret's point. The base feels good about it. I do think that this is a huge issue because if Americans are feeling like my economic, I'm not doing better financially than I was, and I see mass guys, downtown pulling people off the street. How is this helping me? And we're spending tens of billions of dollars on this, and I think that's a huge issue here for them. We're seeing just the other day there was a federal judge blocked 50,000 Haitians from being sent out of the country in Florida. And this is huge. These are huge numbers we're talking about. So it's all up in the air.
Yeah. And there's always, whenever a new single party comes in, oftentimes that single party overreaches, and then there's blowback. Oftentimes